Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and no matter what's happening around them, chaos, criticism, or crisis, they carry a sense of calm that almost feels untouchable? It's not that nothing ever goes wrong for them. It's not that they don't feel stress, anger, or fear. It's that they've learned something most of us never get taught. They've learned to act as if nothing bothers them. And no, that's not denial. That's not pretending problems don't exist. It's strength. It's poise. It's the quiet discipline of choosing how to respond when life doesn't go as planned. And let's be honest, life rarely goes as planned. Today I want to show you why learning to act as if nothing bothers you is one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop. Not just for your career, but for your relationships, your peace of mind, and your future. So let's dive into the 5 principles that can help us build that strength, step by step. There's a split second between what happens to us and how we respond. It's invisible, it's quick, and most of us live our entire lives without realizing that it even exists. But in that split second, in that pause, there is power, real transformational power, because it's in that moment we get to choose who we want to be. Think of a time when someone said something that really cut deep. Maybe it was a coworker dismissing your idea in front of others. Maybe it was a partner, a friend, even a stranger who made a careless comment that hit you the wrong way. What was your first reaction? For most of us, the instinct is to strike back, to defend, to shut down, to say something we'll probably regret later. And that's normal, it's human, but being human doesn't mean being impulsive. It means being aware, and awareness begins in the pause. It's tempting to think that control means bottling up emotions or pretending we don't care, but that's not strength. Strength is choosing not to let someone else dictate how you show up. That's the pause. That's where you reclaim control, not over the world, not over the situation, but over yourself. Because if you can control your response, you can control the outcome. Viktor Frankl, who survived one of the darkest chapters in human history, once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." Think about that for a moment. If someone who endured the unimaginable could discover freedom in that mental space, then surely we can practice it in our everyday lives, in the boardroom, in the kitchen, in a tough conversation with someone we care about. But here's the thing, the pause doesn't come naturally. It's a discipline, it's a skill, and like any skill, it needs to be trained. The good news is that it doesn't take a grand moment to begin. You can start today. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic, take a breath. That's it. Just one breath. Feel your hands on the wheel, feel your chest rise. That's the space. That's where your power lives. And that breath, it might be the difference between arriving angry or arriving calm, between saying something you can't take back or saying nothing at all, between escalating the conflict or letting it pass like a storm cloud overhead. Now, you might be thinking, but what if I'm right? What if they did disrespect me? What if I should be angry? And that's fair. We're not talking about avoiding difficult emotions. This isn't about pretending nothing bothers you. It's about choosing not to let what bothers you define your actions. There's a big difference. When we react without thinking, we give away our agency. We give the other person control. But when we pause, even just for a few seconds, we put ourselves back in the driver's seat. That space allows logic to catch up with emotion. It gives our better judgment a chance to speak. It invites clarity into chaos. Let me share a real story. A young executive I once met was leading a project that hit some major snags, deadlines missed, budget issues, a lot of pressure. In a heated meeting, a senior leader publicly blamed her in front of everyone. Her face flushed, her hands trembled, every part of her wanted to defend herself, but instead, she paused. She took one slow breath and then calmly she said, "I like to take ownership of what's mine and also understand what can be done to move forward." The room shifted, the tone changed, and later even the executive who had lashed out apologized to her. That moment could have gone 100 different ways, but because she paused, she led. And that's what the pause does. It puts you in a position of leadership, even if no one gave you the title. because people notice the ones who don't flinch, who don't spiral, who stay grounded. That's magnetic, that's influence. The pause also invites empathy. When we react quickly, we usually do it from a place of ego or fear. But when we pause, we create space to consider the other person's perspective. Maybe they're having a rough day. Maybe their behavior isn't about you at all. Maybe they're projecting their own pain. You don't have to excuse the behavior, but understanding it might just free you from taking it personally. Every one of us has experienced moments we wish we could take back. Words said in anger, texts sent too fast, doors slammed, relationships damaged. What we're talking about here is a way to reduce those moments, to live with fewer regrets, to become the kind of person who others trust, not just because you're kind or intelligent, but because you're consistent, because you don't let small things shake your center. And when bigger things do, because they will, you meet them with intention instead of impulse. So begin noticing the space. Pay attention to the tightness in your chest, the rush of heat, the urgency to respond. That's your cue. That's your signal to pause, not to freeze, not to disengage, but to breathe, to think, to lead. Because in a world full of noise and reaction, the person who knows how to pause, even for a moment, becomes the calm in the storm. Let me tell you a story. A young marketing manager I once worked with was facing a real challenge. Her team had grown distant. Communication was breaking down. Every suggestion she made seemed to be met with silence or subtle resistance. She felt ignored, dismissed, even disrespected. And the more she felt that way, the more frustrated she became. Her instinct, like many of us, was to double down, to assert authority, to take control. After all, she was in charge. She had earned her title. Why should she have to fight to be heard? But something in her hesitated. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was exhaustion. Either way, instead of pushing harder, she asked one simple question. Help me understand what's not working here. That was it. No defensiveness, no blame, just curiosity. What happened next surprised even her. One by one, her team began to open up. They talked about feeling overwhelmed, about unclear expectations, about wanting to support her but not knowing how. The air in the room shifted. People stopped bracing themselves and started leaning in. And it wasn't because she had all the answers. It was because she chose to ask the right question. That's what curiosity does. It disarms. It breaks down the walls that ego builds. And in that moment, she made a decision that leaders rarely make under pressure. She chose curiosity over ego. Let's be honest, when we feel attacked, dismissed, overlooked, curiosity is not the natural reaction. Our ego wants to protect us. It wants to build a case. It wants to be right. That's its job. But sometimes being right isn't what changes a situation. Sometimes being curious is what creates space for change. Think about it. How many times in your own life have you responded to someone from a place of assumption? You assumed they were being difficult. You assumed they didn't care. You assumed they had bad intentions. And based on that story, you acted, maybe with distance, maybe with anger, maybe with silence. And the story became true, not because it was true, but because no one ever questioned it. Curiosity is what breaks that pattern. It takes courage to pause and say, what else could this mean? It takes humility to ask, is there something I don't see? It takes strength to listen when what you really want is to defend. Let me give you another example. A team leader in a high-pressure startup started noticing tension between two of his top performers. Deadlines were being missed, communication was sharp, and the rest of the team was starting to feel the strain. His first instinct was to pull rank, to sit them down and tell them to work it out or else. But instead, he invited each person in separately and asked the same question. What's this been like for you? The answers were completely different. One felt unheard, the other felt unsupported. Neither wanted conflict, they just didn't feel safe being honest with each other. The leader didn't solve the problem by forcing a resolution. He solved it by being curious enough to understand what the real problem was. Now, this doesn't mean we never speak up or set boundaries. It doesn't mean we let people walk all over us. But it does mean we choose to understand before we assume. And understanding doesn't make you weak, it makes you trustworthy. Here's why this matters. When you lead with ego, you might win the argument, but you'll lose the connection. When you lead with curiosity, you build bridges. You invite collaboration. You create a culture where people don't feel like they have to be perfect to be heard. And that kind of culture, that's where creativity lives. That's where loyalty grows. That's where people thrive. This principle goes beyond the workplace. It applies to marriages, friendships, parenting, even the way we talk to strangers. Think about how many conflicts in our lives could be softened or even solved if one person had simply asked, "What's going on for you?" Or "Can you help me understand?" Or even, "Are you okay?" That one question has the power to shift someone from defensive to open, from guarded to vulnerable. But curiosity doesn't come without risk. It means you might hear something uncomfortable. It means you might discover that you were wrong or that you contributed to the problem. That's where ego wants to step back in and protect you. But every time you choose to stay curious, to really listen, to really seek, you grow. And so do the people around you. I know it's hard, especially when emotions are high and pride is at stake, especially when you feel hurt or unappreciated. But here's the truth, ego will always try to protect your image. Curiosity will help you protect the relationship, and when the relationship wins, everyone wins. And so the next time you feel the urge to push, to defend, to be right, take a moment, ask a question instead. You might just find that what felt like resistance was actually a cry for support. What felt like disrespect was actually insecurity. What felt like conflict was actually confusion. And in that moment, you become the person who doesn't just manage situations, you transform them. Not by force, not by control, but by choosing to be human first. Here's something most people won't tell you. Your value is not tied to your success, not to your wins, not to your income, not even to how well you're liked. It's not tied to your failures either, not to the pitch that flopped, the relationship that ended, or the opportunity you missed. And it's definitely not tied to what someone thinks of you. Not your boss, not your peers, not your parents. Let that really sink in. Because most of us have spent our lives chasing approval, chasing outcomes, hoping that if we do well enough, achieve enough, impress enough, then we'll feel worthy, then we'll matter, then we'll be enough. And it's no wonder. From the time we're kids, we're taught that our performance determines our value. Get the grades, score the goals, win the awards, make everyone proud. And if you fall short, if you mess up, if you fail, well, you start to believe that you are a failure. So when something goes wrong, when the numbers don't add up, when the promotion doesn't happen, when someone walks away, we don't just feel disappointed. We feel small. We feel ashamed. We don't just say, "I failed." We say, "I'm a failure." And that story becomes dangerous because it's not true, and yet we live as if it is. But what if your worth was never on trial? What if you didn't have to earn your value? What if you could show up, give your absolute best, and still know that how things turn out doesn't get to decide your identity? This isn't about not caring. This is about caring deeply and still being grounded in something bigger than your results. Because the truth is, there will be times when you do everything right and it still won't work out. You'll prepare for weeks and still lose the deal. You'll invest in the relationship and still get hurt. You'll lead with heart and still get criticized. And if your sense of self-worth is glued to those outcomes, you'll break every time something breaks. You'll live in constant fear of being exposed, of not measuring up, of being found out. That's not sustainable. That's not freedom. I remember speaking with a designer who had just poured everything into a campaign. Countless late nights, endless revisions. She believed in it, and so did the team. But when the campaign launched, it didn't land. The metrics weren't great, and the client wasn't happy. She sat in my office and said, "I feel like I let everyone down." I asked her one question. "Did you give it everything you had?" She said, "Yes." Then I said, "Then the outcome doesn't get to define you, the effort does." She looked at me like no one had ever said that to her before, and maybe no one had. Because we don't celebrate effort in this culture, we celebrate wins. But the people who go the furthest, the ones who lead with purpose, not pressure, they've learned something different. They've learned to separate who they are from what they do. It's not detachment in the cold sense. It's not apathy, it's maturity. It's the ability to say, "I care about this, but it doesn't own me. Because when you're not chasing your self-worth through every project, every relationship, every goal, you become more courageous. You take more risks. You're less afraid to fail because failure no longer threatens your identity. You also become a better teammate. When you're not trying to prove yourself in every moment, you're free to lift others up. You listen more. You share credit. You lead with empathy. People feel safer around you because you're not operating out of fear. You're not trying to earn your value through them. Even in relationships, this principle matters. When your sense of self is tied to someone else's approval, love becomes pressure. It becomes performance. And the moment you feel rejected, you collapse. But when you know your worth, independently of what someone else gives or withholds, you can love freely, you can forgive, you can stay or walk away from a place of strength. This mindset also changes how you handle setbacks. When the outcome doesn't define you, it becomes data, not judgment. It becomes information you can learn from. And that's how growth happens. It's not, I failed, therefore I'm broken. It's, that didn't work. What can I adjust? That shift turns disappointment into development. Look at the people you admire, not just for what they've achieved, but for how they carry themselves. There's a steadiness, a groundedness. It's not because everything goes right for them. It's because they don't ride the emotional roller coaster of wins and losses. They show up, do the work, and let go. Not because they don't care, but because they know their peace matters more than being perfect. And that's something we all need to remember. Because perfection is a moving target. No matter how much you do, someone will always have a different opinion. There will always be critics. There will always be outcomes outside your control. But if your peace is rooted in effort, in values, in intention, then you're unshakable. You're free. You're not what you do. You're not what you produce. You are worthy even when things fall apart, especially the. And the sooner you believe that, the lighter life becomes. Your brain is a storyteller, and it's relentless. From the moment you wake up, it's crafting narratives about who you are, what others think, what might happen. It fills in the blanks, reads between the lines, and makes meaning of silence, tone, and circumstance. And here's the thing, it's very good at drama. It doesn't respect me. I'll never be good enough. Everyone saw me fail. They're all talking about me. These stories feel real. They sound like truth echoing in your mind, but what if they weren't? What if they were just that, stories? Narratives written not in fact, but in fear. Because here's what most people never realize. Your brain doesn't need evidence to build a story. It just needs emotion. And once the emotion shows up, especially fear, shame, or embarrassment, the story takes off. But what if the story wasn't true? Cognitive psychology has shown us again and again that our thoughts create our feelings, not the other way around. What you think about something, not the thing itself, is what creates your emotional response. It's not the missed deadline that makes you spiral. It's the thought, now they think I'm incompetent. It's not the silence after you speak up in a meeting. It's the thought, I shouldn't have said anything. I sounded stupid. That's where the anxiety comes from. Not the situation, the story. The story you tell yourself about what just happened determines whether it haunts you or helps you grow. And when you learn how to reframe that story, to shift the lens just slightly, you change everything. Let me share a conversation I once had with a client who had just led his first major presentation to leadership. He'd spent weeks preparing slides, data, talking points, but during the meeting, one executive glanced at his phone halfway through. Another asked a sharp question about a number he'd cited. The rest of the day, he spiraled. They hated it. I blew it. I'm not ready for this level. I asked him a simple question. What else could be true? He paused. Well, maybe they were just distracted. Maybe the question was genuine, not criticism. I nodded. And maybe the fact that they asked questions means they were engaged. That's all it took to start a shift. The facts hadn't changed, but the story had. And with a new story came a new emotional experience. That's what reframing does. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't deny the facts, but it gives you your power back. Here's the thing. Reframing doesn't mean pretending things are perfect. It doesn't mean putting on a smile when everything's falling apart. It means being honest about what you can control and changing the lens through which you interpret life. Instead of, they're judging me, you might try, they're probably caught up in their own stress. Instead of, I messed up, try, I just found a way that didn't work. One of the most powerful reframes I've ever heard came from someone who lost their job and said, maybe this is the beginning of something better. That's resilience. That's mindset. That's leadership. Because when you're able to reframe the narrative, you move from victim to author. You stop living under your thoughts and start living above them. You don't have to believe everything your brain tells you, especially when it's scared, especially when it's hurt. Think about how this plays out in relationships. Someone doesn't respond to your text. The story, they're ignoring me. I'm not important to them. But what else could be true? Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they didn't know how to respond. Maybe it's not about you at all. That shift, that one moment of curiosity can save you hours of anxiety and protect your peace. Or in leadership, you offer an idea and it gets passed over. The story, no one values my input. But what if the timing wasn't right? What if people just needed more time to understand it? What if it's not rejection, just redirect? We do this to ourselves too. You miss a workout and think, I'll never stay consistent. You get nervous before speaking and say, I'm terrible at public speaking. But that's not truth. It's just repetition. You've told yourself that story so many times, it feels like fact. But you can choose a new one. I'm learning to be more consistent. I'm getting better at managing nerves when I speak. I'm showing up even when it's uncomfortable. Changing your narrative is one of the most powerful tools you'll ever have, because the story shapes the state, and your state, your emotional, mental, and physical state, determines how you show up. The moment you shift the narrative, you unlock resilience. You start to bounce back faster. You stop letting setbacks define you. You stop giving your power away to every comment, every glance, every failure. And most importantly, you create space between what happens to you and what happens inside you. That space is everything. That space is where choice lives. That's where leadership begins. That's where you get to decide again and again how you want to see the world and yourself in it. Because life will continue to throw you curveballs, people will misunderstand you, plans will fall apart, you will doubt yourself. But if you can pause and reframe the story, you won't get stuck in it, you'll write your way through it, and that is how you rise. Years ago, a Navy SEAL instructor shared something with a group of corporate leaders. He said, when chaos hits, everyone looks to the calmest person in the room. Think about that. Not the smartest, not the loudest, not even the most experienced, the calmest. That person becomes the anchor, the one who gives the rest of the room permission to breathe. And the truth is, we've all felt it. Whether you're in a boardroom, a hospital, a crisis call, or just your own family kitchen, when tension rises, everyone subconsciously scans the room for signals. Is this safe? Is this fixable? Is someone in control? And more often than not, that judgment isn't made based on plans or credentials. It's made based on energy. It's made based on how someone shows up under pressure. So the question is, when pressure hits, what energy do you bring into the room? Calm doesn't mean you don't feel stress. It doesn't mean the world around you isn't loud or chaotic. It means you've trained yourself, sometimes through fire, to be the quiet in the noise. To breathe when your chest is tight. To speak slowly when others are shouting. To see clearly when others are reacting. There's a misconception that staying calm is a form of denial, that it's passive, that it means you don't care. But calm is not apathy, it's leadership. Calm is strength under control. It's presence. It's the kind of presence that says, I may not have all the answers yet, but I'm not going to be moved by fear. Now think about the opposite. We've all followed someone who unraveled under stress. Maybe it was a manager who panicked when goals weren't met, or a friend who lashed out when something went wrong. Maybe it was even you in a moment when the pressure overwhelmed your peace. That's not a failure of ability, it's a gap in training. And the good news is, calm can be trained. One of the most powerful skills you can develop, both for yourself and for the people around you, is learning how to be unshaken when things shake. That doesn't mean you ignore problems. It means you stop letting problems determine your identity, your behavior, or your value. It means you take the emotion out of the driver's seat and let clarity take the wheel. I remember a story from a product team that had just launched a new feature. Within minutes, it crashed part of the platform. Customers were angry. Social media lit up. People were on edge. The team's lead engineer, instead of panicking or assigning blame, calmly said, let's focus on isolating the issue. We'll take responsibility and communicate updates every 30 minutes. That energy, that steadiness, it changed the entire atmosphere. People stopped spiraling. They started solving. The problem didn't magically disappear, but the leadership presence made it manageable. That's the power of calm. It slows down panic. It clarifies the next step. It says, we're still okay. And here's what makes calm so contagious. It creates safety. Not just physical safety, but emotional safety. When people know you won't overreact, they're more honest with you. When they know you'll stay grounded, they'll follow you even when the path is unclear. Calm builds trust, and trust builds teams that can survive anything. This isn't just true in organizations, it's true in families, in marriages, in friendships. You've probably had moments when your calm helps someone else catch their breath. A child having a meltdown, a friend facing bad news, a partner overwhelmed with anxiety. Your presence didn't fix everything, but it changed everything. And that's the beautiful paradox. When you learn to act as if nothing bothers you, not because you're numb, but because you're anchored, you don't just protect your peace, you create peace. For others, for the room, for the moment. But how do you build that kind of calm? You start small. You practice in the little storms, the rude email, the frustrating delay, the mistake that sets you back. You breathe first, you think second, you act third. You remind yourself, I don't have to match the chaos around me. I can respond from clarity, not reactivity. Over time, it becomes your default. Your nervous system learns that it doesn't have to sound the alarm every time something goes wrong. Your mind learns to look for perspective before it panics. Your team learns they can bring problems to you without fear of being judged. That trust, that space, it's rare, and people will follow it. You become the presence people lean on, the voice people trust, the leader people follow, not just because of your title, but because of your temperament. Because in a world that constantly screams, reacts, and rushes, calm is radical. It's magnetic. It's needed. So when chaos hits, don't underestimate the power of your energy. Let your presence be the one that says, we'll get through this. One breath, one step, one clear decision at a time. Because calm is contagious. And when you carry it, you change more than the moment. You change the atmosphere. You set a tone others can follow. And in doing so, you remind everyone around you that peace is possible, even here, even now. So let me ask you something, not as a speaker on a stage, but human to human. What would change in your life if just for a moment you stopped reacting and started responding? What if, instead of being driven by what bothers you, you were drawn forward by what builds you? We live in a world that tells us we have to hustle harder, defend faster, prove more, stay louder. We're told to fight every battle, win every argument, and fix every misunderstanding. But what if the real strength isn't found in the noise? It's in the stillness. What if the people we admire most, the ones who seem untouchable, grounded, steady, aren't cold or detached, but simply trained to protect their peace, trained to respond, not react, trained to act as if nothing bothers them, not because nothing does, but because they've made a deeper decision about who they want to be. Think about your own life. How often does stress hijack your clarity? How often do you leave a meeting, a conversation, or an interaction feeling like you gave away your power, not because of what happened, but because of how you showed up in it? You don't have to live that way. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to become numb. You don't have to suppress your feelings or pretend nothing ever gets under your skin. That's not strength, that's denial. And we're not talking about denial, we're talking about presence. A presence that's so anchored in purpose and awareness that it refuses to let momentary chaos define long-term identity. What if you chose today to practice a different rhythm? What if, instead of rushing to fix everything, you paused and you gave space for clarity to enter? What if, instead of assuming you're under attack, you asked, what might be going on here that I don't see? What if you began to untangle your worth from every outcome and remembered that your value isn't up for negotiation? What if you started noticing the story you're telling yourself and dared to tell a better one? And what if you trained yourself, little by little, breath by breath, to bring calm into chaos, not just for you, but for the people who look to you without saying a word? Because here's the truth, the world doesn't need more people who are quick to speak, quick to judge, quick to defend. It needs more people who can walk into tension and bring peace with them. It needs more leaders who don't get swept away by the moment, but who stand anchored in who they are and what they value. You don't need a title to lead like that. You don't need a podium or a platform or permission. You need a decision. A decision to stop letting the world decide how you'll feel today. A decision to stop reacting to everything that shakes you. A decision to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Start where you are, start small. Pause, even for 1 second, one breath. Ask. Instead of assuming, detach from the belief that your value is tied to anything outside of you. Reframe the story that's holding you hostage. Lead with calm, with grace, with steadiness. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, not because you're pretending nothing bothers you, but because you've decided that who you are, your presence, will be bigger than your problems. You've decided that peace will no longer be a luxury, but a practice. And you've chosen to be someone others can count on when everything feels uncertain. The people around you are watching. Your kids, your team, your partner, your friends. And not to judge you, but to find safety in your presence. When you remain steady, they remember they can too. That's what changes everything. You don't need to fix the world, but maybe today you start by not letting the world shake who you are. Learn to act as if nothing bothers you, not because you're disconnected, but because you've chosen something better. And watch what happens when you do. Watch what happens when you show up with presence. Watch what happens when your calm becomes the anchor in someone else's storm. Watch what happens when you lead, not with power, not with fear, not with ego, but with peace. Because that's what we follow. That's what we trust. And that's what changes the world.